Moments ago, the Supreme Court completed hearing arguments in a case with vast implications for the midterms. It's an effort led by the RNC, which would essentially block any votes by mail received after Election Day, even if they were legally cast and postmarked on time. It could potentially disenfranchise voters in more than a dozen states, including elderly and disabled voters who aren't able to vote in person. Native Americans, for whom voting by mail is often the only option due to the complete lack of in-person voting in some states and tribal communities. Black voters who have traditionally faced longer wait times and polling location changes. Here's how both sides frame their arguments before the court.
If somebody asks who won, the truthful answer is we don't know yet. The ballots are still coming in, and they may trickle in for weeks or months. And in fact, they may trickle in for weeks or months with or without a postmark in differing ways in differing states. That reality gives the lie to the idea that we have a uniform national election day.
If Election Day must be what it was in 1845, that takes out much more than the ballot receipt laws of 30 states today. It dooms absentee voting, modern methods of voting, the secret ballot, and more.
I want to bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Tell us what you heard as you were listening to those arguments today.
Well, Chris, one of the things that I heard the justices press on is the question of when is a ballot final? In other words, when is a ballot as we understand it? Is it when it's cast? Is it when it's received and counted? A number of the conservative justices appeared to be trying to get an admission from Scott Stewart, who is the Solicitor General of Mississippi, that a ballot could be recalled by a voter because they want an admission that a ballot is not effectively final until it is in the hands of election officials and counted. That matters because they say that would overshoot basically Mississippi's opportunity to set its own time, place, and manner of elections. That federal law prescribes Election Day as being the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And as a result, Mississippi and other states are not at liberty to grant a grace period for mail-in votes.
Let me ask you about what is, and I don't know if they talked about this. I didn't have a chance to listen to the arguments. There was a lot going on today. A common sense thing. Among the people who live abroad, besides people who may work abroad, students who may be studying abroad, thousands and thousands of U.S. military members. It is common sense. Things happen in the closing days of an election, of a campaign. And so for some people who may be undecided or leaning one way or another, may want to wait until they have all the facts at hand. But you don't have that option if you're living in Germany or Japan or anywhere else in any other country where you cannot physically be here to vote.
And the defense of those uniformed service members and their right and opportunity to cast a vote when they see fit before Election Day was put to former Solicitor General Paul Clement, arguing on behalf of the Mississippi Libertarian Party today. She was essentially saying to him, look, that's a federal law, too. That's not just a manner of tradition or something that states prescribe. There is a federal law that speaks to the opportunity of uniformed service members to cast their ballots. And wouldn't you effectively be negating provisions of that law by insisting that the meaning of the word election, both constitutionally and in other federal statutes, necessitates a receipt and counting of all votes by Election Day? Wouldn't you be subverting the right of those uniformed service members to vote? That is one of, I think, few points that some of the liberal justices scored today. On the whole, during the argument, Chris, I would say it was not a great day for Mississippi. Scott Stewart, who argued on behalf of the state, had a resounding victory, as you'll remember, in the Dobbs case. He was the person who argued the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I doubt that he left the court today feeling as good as he did on that day, an observation made by some of our friends at the New York Times who are listening to the argument live.
But what could this mean ultimately for the midterms?
Ultimately, for the midterms, it could mean that the 18 states and a territory that have these grace periods by which you can postmark your ballot by Election Day and have it counted for a certain number of days thereafter, that those would be invalidated. And that, as you have noted, would have wide-ranging implications for any number of constituencies of voters. And we're not talking about Democrats or Republicans. We're talking about the elderly, people who work jobs that preclude them from getting to the polls at a time where they are open, people who are disabled, and, of course, people who are living overseas, including many members who are serving abroad in the United States military and our diplomatic corps.
When do we expect a ruling here?
I think this is one of those decisions that we will be biting our nails until the end of June. Fallon Gallagher and I will be waiting. She's in the courtroom right now, and I'm sure we're all really anticipating hearing from her what she saw today.
Lisa Rubin, thank you so much.